Kanaka and welcome to Reset Fiji, your platform for ideas, innovations and solutions. I'm Stanley Simpson. Fiji has confirmed 21 cases of COVID-19 to date. The recent cases come 80 days since our last patient tested positive. Our borders remain closed except for our repatriated citizens coming back home. The economic fallout from the pandemic has been significant as key trading partners' borders remain closed. For an economy like Fiji, where about 46% of GDP is dependent on tourism, our economy is in a state of shock. Today, we grapple with the realities of increased number of laid-off workers, resulting in large unemployed skilled workforce, an estimated 112,000 job losses, and closure of businesses and hotels for the foreseeable future. The government, for its part, has announced tourism readiness proposals, including the Mbula Bubble, the Blue Lanes, VIP lanes, and Love Our Locals. There is a pressing need, as we have seen from the previous panels, for some to diversify our economy. The question we are all asking is, how do we reset or rethink tourism in Fiji to be more resilient? And how do we get back on our feet? Joining me tonight on this panel on tourism is Fantasha Lockington, the CEO of Fiji Hotel and Tourism Association, James Sowane, Managing Director of Pacific Destinations, Justin Hunter, Ocean Advocate and founder of J. Hunter Pearls, Danny Jason, representing the Duovata Sustainable Tourism Collective and the owner of Namosi Eco Retreat, and Professor Stephen Pratt, USP Head of School of Tourism and Hospitality Management. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to Reset Fiji panel on tourism. And I'll go straight into the panel now. Fantasha Lockington, she's no stranger to the tourism industry with over 30 years in customer relations, policy development and marketing in the airline and cruise sectors. She cautions a step-by-step approach before we open the Mbula Bubble, and we'll talk more about why Fiji must change or be left behind. Fantasha.
I want to talk about doing business post-COVID. So everyone understands that tourism is probably the most resilient industry in Fiji, especially now. It's an industry that's gone through political upheavals, climatic upheavals, financial changes, economic changes, and even a few health issues. This one probably has been the biggest one the industry has come across. And you're right, it was a shock, but it was. It's not a shock anymore because the industry has already picked itself up and is fighting and putting plans into place to get ready for when things change, and things are changing. I really believe that it's not just tourism that should change, because tourism is changing. Everything about how we do our business post-COVID is changing, and we're putting those plans into place right now to make sure that not only our staff will be considered safe and protected when the borders open, but also when we allow visitors into the country, that we keep them safe as well. In all of it, we're trying to ensure that we build the confidence to anybody who wants to come into Fiji for business or pleasure, that you have the confidence that Fiji is going to be as safe as the country that you just left, and that they'll keep you safe. So we've all had to reevaluate how we're doing our business going forward. But I don't believe it's just tourism that should be expected to change. The changes should be implemented by everyone that comes across in some form, way, or fashion with a tourism business. And that means not only private sector, but public sector as well. So if you're thinking that post-COVID, when the borders open up, that it will be just back to business, if you're not in tourism, you're wrong. Everybody else has to come to this party. So we're changing things from the way we're just doing our buffet lines, for instance, the way we're checking in people, the way people are going to get onto a plane, travel in a plane, get out at the airport, get processed, and then come all the way out to wherever you're going to take your holiday. Every part of that chain is changing. from enhanced cleanliness programs to training our staff to recognize, what's a critical situation and what to do with it, to how we're going to serve food, where we serve the food, every single part. And it's costing the industry money to do this. The taxi drivers that will pick people up, the transportation providers, the cruise companies, they're all looking at their COVID-safe plans right now. So what about public sector? Are they going to do the same things as we are? I would like to think so. So the plans for facing this new COVID-safe world should not just be for tourism. It has to go across the board to everybody in Fiji. You have to reevaluate what you're doing and how you're doing it to stay safe. We know that it's not going to be around forever. So while it has been a shock to the industry, we don't believe that we'll stay down for long. It's been the longest the industry has been down. We grant that. But it's not going to be that way forever. So while we're having a think about making changes to what else Fiji relies on in terms of its foreign exchange and how much revenue it can make and where you're going to get your taxes from, many of the things that we can look out to, like agriculture, for instance, and there are other areas like that, that'll take a long time to come through. Tourism, once it's ready to go, will be bringing in the revenue from the minute that those borders open up. So when we're talking about making changes to the economy, those changes should have already started. We should have had some of these plans already in place. The other part that I wanted to mention in terms of agriculture, where it connects with tourism, is one of the things that we're going to be very, aggressive with is understanding the markets that are not going to come back. And these will include people rethinking a holiday in the immediate future. Say the borders open tomorrow, you're not going to get a whole heap of families or honeymooners coming on those flights. They're just not going to come. The other sector that's not going to come are people who've come for meetings, incentives, conferences. They may eventually come, but they probably won't come in the short term. So who are going to be those target markets that we need to look out for? And they may be markets that we have not considered before, like younger people, like the millennial travelers. They are generally people who will travel shorter bursts, but more often. But they have specific requirements. Fiji needs to be up there in terms of the digital literacy when it comes to dealing with younger people. They need to be able to make a booking using their phone and only their phone. They need to be able to use payment gateways to be able to book an adventure, a dive, or a cultural experience, because this is what they're looking for. So Fiji needs to change how it's doing its business as well. And as many of our smaller operators know, it has been an extremely difficult thing to get payment gateways when you're a small business. The banks have not come to that party. Even though we have reached out to them and asked for their assistance with it, it has not been something that we've been able to provide for our smaller business owners. So those areas need to change, and they need to change very quickly, otherwise we lose out on an opportunity for a market that will be looking at Fiji when the borders open, and when people who are very COVID weary right now because they've been cooped up in very small apartments and cold places are looking for that experience that Fiji can offer. So many of these things need to be thought through, need to be changed, and many of the opportunities that are there need to be grasped now and worked on now, because when the borders open, and they will eventually open, this is what we'll be looking out for. So we miss out on certain segments of our market, but we have opportunity to bring in some segments that we've probably not gone after before. The other part is that people will be looking for value for money. Value for money, and imagine that Fiji is advertising itself around the world where everybody else is advertising itself, and we don't have the kind of funds available for really slick advertising in a world that will be throwing out every sort of package deal going on. So we've got to be competing in that environment. So what can we offer in terms of value for money? Do we just simply drop all our prices and not make a profit? Then you won't have businesses surviving for very long. You're in the business to make a profit. So we'll have to have a look at our costs, and many of the costs are driven by our favorite topic, the taxes, as well as the amount of stuff that we have to import because we can't rely on getting those products here in Fiji. And one very basic one is agricultural produce. The IFC did a report a few years ago that was titled From the Farm to the Tourist Table. And the research tells us that around $38 million worth of imported fresh produce is brought in specifically for the tourism market. 34 million is brought in for the local market. Of the 38 million annually, 24 million is able to be grown here in Fiji. So it includes beef products, pork products, and fresh fruit and vegetable. Now, with tourism growing so exponentially over the last few years as it has, why haven't we been able to close that gap? So that's a very quick and easy change for us to make. And before people think about, okay, that sounds like it's going to be too hard, let me take people back, say 10 to 15 years ago when you were at, say, secondary school, and some of us may be a little bit older. There was always a seasonal fruit around that you saw at Christmas that you didn't see at other times of the year. Think now about what you can go to the market and buy right now. You can buy pineapples, you can buy pawpaws, and you can buy watermelons. The reason that you can see that throughout the year here in Fiji is not because somebody suddenly decided that it would be nice to have that as a year-round fruit or 3 different types of fruit. It's because of tourism's demand. It is a demand to have wonderful, fresh, exotic fruit on the breakfast table at every hotel, at every place around Fiji. That's 7 days a week they're demanding this fresh produce. So the suppliers of these fruit have been able to bring that not only to the tourist table, but to my table and your table. So we'd like to see that replicated across a lot of the other fruit and vegetables, across fish and prawns and stuff like that, and meat. Because it can be done here in Fiji. It's just not done on the commercial scale in the kind of quantities and qualities that is demanded by tourism. So it's a possibility. There are opportunities. It's just we need willing and able people to be able to fill those spaces.
Thanks for that. So, I mean, it's a great point. I think quite a lot to digest there, and very good points, Fantasha. You've been in the industry a long time, and why haven't it happened? Why hasn't this complemented? We talk now about diversifying into agriculture. I just want to ask your opinion on why hasn't it happened and what needs to be done for them to complement each other when we talk about diversifying, that both industries thrive in the post-COVID-19 environment?
If you're talking about filling the agricultural space, then I believe a lot of that has to do with understanding what it is that tourism demands. So consultation has taken place, but at a very small scale. It needs to happen where you're not only listening, but asking the right questions and talking to the right people. And we've always been there as FHDA, as an association, to reach out to let whoever wants to know what tourism needs in terms of food products. We would specifically like, as a destination, to be able to put food tourism on our list of why you should come to Fiji. People go to Vietnam for the food. People go to Hong Kong for the food. People go to Singapore for the food. Who do you know talks about Fiji for the food? But you and I, everybody here in the room, knows how wonderful our food is. And in any home across Fiji, you will see different types of food because we grew up in such a multiracial environment. So we're exposed to all this wonderful food. We know how to cook it, we know how to order it, we know how to buy it. But we do not seem to be able to offer as much of this to our people coming to visit, so our visitors from overseas. So we'd like to see a lot more of that.
Thank you. I'd like to come back to you later about agritourism and also how do we adapt to the changes in the digital space that you talked about. But for now, I'd like to move on to James Sowane, who's from Tumbou, Lakemba, Laos. James has almost 30 years of experience in the tourism industry. He's a veteran. Over the years, he has been building and growing his business, Pacific Destinations, Fiji, with his wife. He will be talking about global new normal standards and preparedness for service and adjustment and resilience. James, you have the floor.
Naka Stan, Naka everybody. Today I'm just so honored to be here, taking a break from the West to come into to Suva. And every time I come into Suva, I note there's the Bula bubble and there's the Suva bubble. In the West, things are very quiet, as Fantasia said. The impact of COVID on our industry, on our businesses, was immediate. And I have to say this, that from our operation, when the airports closed on the 26th of March, the impact was absolutely immediate. We had 110 staff working, but post the 26th of March, it started to wither away to now a handful of our team members, about 8 or 10 of them, that come in just to keep the pulse of the operations going. But that's the drastic impact. And part of my talk today is just alerting, creating some awareness on the impact, on the widespread impact of COVID, particularly from our tourism industry, and how it filters through to other businesses and sectors that rely on us. Tourism, from the outset, I just want to say tourism, when you ask people in Fiji what they're thinking of tourism, and I asked my daughter on our drive through, the first impression, and always stays with them, is it's about hotels and airlines, and it stops there. I think today gives me a good platform to also alert or create some awareness that tourism has so many sectors, and some of them are here today. But from our perspective, which I'll speak on, I am from the transport sector, the ground transportation sector in particular, which our business has been involved for the past 21 years. There's also the marine transport sector, and there's also the domestic air transport sector. So that's just some of the areas in terms of transportation, and our role is critical to link to the to other sectors that you'll hear from today. So it's a very diverse industry, and from the topics that I really just want to cover off today, given the short time we have, is firstly this term called protocol. Everyone's hearing protocol. Protocol of the new normal in tourism. That's one. The other one would be, I'd like to just talk about stakeholder, the importance of stakeholder consultation, so that we can address the changing needs, and that's what Fantasia had mentioned earlier. The third point I'll touch on would be on adjustment and resilience at all levels. On protocols, I just wanted to just talk on our side as a transport operator. You'd have seen that when I said other sectors, the airlines, Fiji Airways, have come out with their protocol. What is there for when they start receiving guests or guests onto the aircraft. For us, also you'll be hearing soon from airports, international airports and 90 airport for our case, on what they will do. And then once they clear airport, then that's where our service starts. But we all have to bear in mind that our business is our industry, it's a people-based industry. It's all about people. People travel to our destination to consume the holiday experience that so it's a complete opposite. They have to travel to us. What it means is a lot of touch points. From the airport that they are embarking from, to their own customs and immigration, to our Fiji Airways aircraft. So there's protocols that have to be followed and implemented. When they get off the aircraft at the airport, there's the immigration, then they go through customs and quarantine, biosecurity, and then from there they meet our team. So all of these touch points, we all have to come up with protocols that's aligned to what the source markets would deem as acceptable. Acceptable for example, if we just use Australia and New Zealand as being the short-haul major markets for us. They have to see that our industry is ready, that we have thought through all these touch points, and that they would be safe to allow their citizens to visit our country. So from our team, as an example, when they come out of the customs hall, our team would normally greet them with flower leis and take them to our office, and they do the documentation and then escort them to their pre-booked vehicles before we take them to the allocated hotels. All of that has to change. Can we put on leis anymore? Can we touch, can we make that physical contact? No more documentation. We'll have to do digital itineraries. So that's the key process that we're going through now in terms of preparing for post-COVID travel, or the new normal. But protocol, in my view, the hotels have theirs, and then after the hotels, then in a 5-night stay, they might want to go out, venture out to experience a village tour with Dan, or with Justin's Pearl Farm in Sabu Sabu. So all of that, they will have to develop protocols. So all the touch points that relates back to these visitors, we all have to work together to create protocols that's acceptable. Okay? So that's a key point we have to talk about. Then you go into the bigger picture of the general public. Government has been stressing the protocols for everyone to follow. And I see there's a lot of, yes, they receive, but the action part of it is not 100%. But what government is trying to say, and what the Ministry of Health is trying to say, is if everyone follows our protocol at the moment is to contain the virus, then we are deemed as a safe destination. If we are not following the protocol, and that's where possible outbreaks will occur, and then we go right down the ladder again in terms of building up our credibility as an approved destination. So it is for everybody. It's everyone's responsibility to be aware of what their role is in the various protocols that they have to abide by. The other thing in terms of protocol is consistency. And for us in tourism, all of us here, we know there's no Saturdays or Sundays in tourism. Every day is a Monday. It's a 24/7 operation, 24/7, year-round. So for us, we have to be in our A game every single day, 7 days a week. So the key word there is consistency. We can't be following part of the protocol one day, and then on the next day we sort of skip. And as we know, as the days goes on, people start skipping those processes. So again, those are some points we need to be aware of. The second point on consultation with stakeholders. I think this is critical. We have so much time now. We've had 3.5 months of doing pretty much, someone said to me last week, waking up to nothing in the West. You can only plan so much as a business. You can only plan so much. But you'll hit a wall where it says, okay, we have to park it there until we get some clarity. And everything is fluid right now. Okay, what we may think is correct in terms of the situation or protocols today may change tomorrow or may need to be adjusted tomorrow. So that's the reality of the situation. In saying that, it is so important, and that's why I was so willing to come be part of this forum, is the need to engage with stakeholders at all levels. And for us as a transport operator, this is an opportune time for us to engage with public sector. In particular, we would be aligned to the likes of the Land Transport Authority, LTA. This is the time, and I'm calling out to the LTA. We have written to them a few times. We have met our minister, who's very good, very supportive, who was keen for us to meet, because the laws and policies were written pre-COVID. Okay? We have to adjust our businesses, and the public or the policymakers need to be aware of of the changes that we have to operate under. And some of that will not fulfill the existing policies. So that's a critical need for us. We have so much time. to sit and talk and plan and be prepared. I'll give you an example. For what we expect in transport is, given the protocols that they might be required in terms of social distancing, a vehicle that I would be able to carry 53 passengers in a coach, I might have to cut that down to fulfill the requirements to carry only 30 passengers. Okay? A vehicle that carries 4 passengers in an SUV or a sedan, the recent protocols that I've been seeing around the world is front seat has to be empty. So I lose one seat, one revenue seat. So what it means is that if I am restricted in the number of passengers that I can carry, I will have to bring in more units, more vehicles to meet the anticipated demand. Okay, that's easy to say. But to get a licensed vehicle that suits the category of the vehicles from a sedan to a omnibus, just to get a permit, for example, takes 3 months to get a permit. And that's, if I am to align myself to be prepared for that anticipated demand, I'm taking the risk in investing in new vehicles. So if I am prepared to take the risk, yet the policy is holding me back, or the regulation, the outdated regulation is holding us back, it is not productive for our industry. What that means is that I have to maybe be forced to, or in our terms, subcontract to other transport operators who are equally busy, and then we go to the next level of subcontracting, and that's where we start compromising on our quality of vehicles, of delivery, of service. So those are the many factors that if the public sector understands, that the statutory bodies understand our needs and the changing needs, we will be ready, we'll be in a good position. Adjustment and resilience, I think everyone's saying that, we have to adjust. We know that most of our businesses, when we do come out of this phase, when the borders reopen, we will, most of us will be coming 30% less than what we were in terms of staff count, in terms of resources. We have to be lean, we have to be creative to remain viable. Because if they are limiting the number of people on aircrafts, they're limiting the number of people that we can carry, the market just shrinks. It's a shrunken market that we have to work with and try and make it viable as a business. We have to make tough decisions on people that we may have to let go of or bring in gradually. Okay, so that adjustment is critical for us to be talking about at all levels. As I mentioned, at stakeholder levels, which I've just mentioned. More importantly, on what we can control is at community levels. Community levels through the churches now that's opened up, although restricted numbers. But more importantly, in my view, is at family levels. Just as an aside, we started talking to our staff in February after a marketing visit that I came back from in Australia, when I started to see the trend of caution was coming in. And we started to have a workshop for all of our staff. So I made it a point that I spoke to every member of our team, 110 of them. We had sessions. We gave them overview of what we anticipate COVID is going to be. At the time it was called coronavirus, and what our plans were, what our phases were. And we walked them through those phases. So when the decision was made out of commercial reality to start phasing them out, they understood. They understood. But the key word we mentioned to our team was you have to adjust. As a family, you have to sit, again, it comes back to this consultation. You have to sit with your families, tell them the anticipated impact on your jobs, that you'll have to make sacrifices through adaptation. You have to give up maybe some of the luxury items that we have, and take away the mandua culture. And I say to them, if Courts turns up or high purchase facility turns up, takes away your TV or your washing machine because you cannot keep up with payments, let it be. But focus on what's important. That can only be amicable if families sit together and accept the reality. And again, that's that's the consultation or the talanoa spirit that, that's the result. Otherwise, we are seeing a lot of these social issues, which is a concern to me personally, but I'm sure there's a lot of NGOs that are doing great work and government. But that's a key adjustment. So not only businesses, all levels of society have to adjust. And that's why I make that opening joke that somehow I think Suva is in a different bubble. You don't see the pain that we are going through in the West. As I said, for us it was immediate. As soon as the borders closed, it was immediate, the impact. So our businesses in the West, we have not received revenue for over 3.5 months now. And that's the final point I just want to touch on. After adjustment comes resilience in business. How long can businesses hold out? How long can families hold out? So hopefully we can throw that into the mix. That's very important for all of us. Okay? How long will the banks allow the mortgage holiday? I think it comes up, the 6 months comes up in September. So these are key issues. These are issues we can control, factors we can control don't worry about the macro stuff that's going on around the world. We focus on what we, as a country, as a community, can have influence over. And hopefully the 3 points is sufficient for today's function.
I think that's really great to hear directly from someone directly on the ground facing real practical issues in the tourism industry. And I think I haven't heard, and I'm in the media, some of those things before. And that's telling about some of the key practical issues that you've had to face, that you've had to adjust to, and the things that you're thinking about. And I like the idea of your comment about the people that you have to deal with and how you've had to adjust, because of all these people, one would understand you've invested a lot in them over the years. I think that provides an opportunity for someone from the audience who may wish to ask a question, who has a burning question right now, to James. Is there anyone willing to give a question now? But I think we'll come back and explore some of the issues raised by Mr. Sowane. The key point was about focusing on what we can do now, which is an important step that tied into the public sector consultations that I think you're trying to say must be done, or more must be done at this time, complementing what Fantasha has said in the opening remarks. We will now move on, but before that, I just want to recap on our polls from last week, which you'll see on the screen now. That the polls on topic on technology and innovation, the topics of interest as voted by you. That's on the screen now. So taking note of that. But I move on now to someone who I know quite well, who's from our very beautiful hometown of Savu-Savu. He's a pearl farmer and an ocean advocate. His pearl business is world-renowned. It's implemented bold new farming techniques, established relationships with local villages. Justin is intensely committed to keeping the marine environment of Savu-Savu Bay in its pristine condition by developing the pearl industry and in working closely with emerging pearl farmers. And he's also intensely passionate about something called the Blue Town Initiative. Over to you, Justin.
Thank you, Stanley. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here. I guess I'm going to talk about Savu-Savu, a blue model town, and this is something that has been developed over the last 4 years. Its origins were in Winston, then it went through Oceans and Sustainable Development Goal 14, COP23, Oceans Pathway, and then what is known as the Blue Economy, which is a unique book on how to develop ocean resources in a sustainable manner. We've been developing this, and I guess I'm here today because I believe it highlights a solution in how we should reset our entire country and also tourism, because I believe it's a model that will not only rebuild Fiji, or Savu Savu in this case, but it will also provide the framework for resilient communities and a thriving community going forward. The concept is based on one major component, and that is merging conservation and economic opportunities for our people. That is something that everybody talks about doing, but nobody's done it. And I think in the age of the ethical consumer, the consumer who's aware and understands about sustainability and these things, this is where we want to go. It is made specifically for our tropical developing islands and coastal communities. This model is replicable throughout, I think, the South Pacific. And it's based on several things that we've learned. And, you know, I must say, we learned through Winston, which was unfortunate, and we were provided the platform or understanding more about oceans and COP. And because of that, we create new ideas the more we learn, eh? So we all know that we're going through what's climate change, and we've got warming sea temperatures. And when you've got warming sea temperatures, what sea animals and fish stocks are best adapted to live in a world with warming temperatures? And there's also what's called a polar migration of cold water species, which are the cold water species feed most of the world now. However, they're moving further north and further south. They're getting compressed into a smaller area. What is going to fill that void is going to be seafood and animals from our tropical reefs. And it is crucial under COP21, the Paris Accord, when they talk about adapting and mitigating the impacts of climate change. We've got to think about the genetic bunker that we're sitting on and the role that it will play in the future, providing food security for 70% of the world's population that lives on in coastal cities, that rely and get 20% of their protein from food and fisheries. So in a time of warming sea temperatures, the reefs that we sit on, the environment that we have around us, the value is immeasurable. You can't put a dollar value on it, and it's not just immeasurable to us, it's immeasurable to the rest of the world. And we've got to tell the story and get it out there. And probably one of the key aspects we've got to look at is what is the greatest threat to our marine environment, and that's poverty. And we're seeing that right now with COVID. MPAs and places, you're going to see the fish in the markets are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Traditional MPAs do not work when families cannot put food on the table for their kids and they're losing jobs. So we've got to build resiliency around these things, and we've got to develop a whole new concept on how we look at tourism and the opportunity this might create. Because at the end of the day, the pollution issues we face have been dealt with in developed countries. So this is really a mechanism to transfer technology from developed countries into our island countries where we have this incredible genetic bunker that they need. So I'm talking about how do we fund this revolution and those things. So this is the way we have to sell it. At its core, at its very base, it's a mechanism to transfer existing practices, technology from developed nations to our islands and coastal communities. And in our plan, we have 7 pillars that this is based on. And one is developing a framework for our towns and communities, one that is user-friendly, low footprint, and not tourist-friendly, but visitor and guest-friendly. We want to create an industry where people can come and be part of our towns, where they go to our markets and they see the food. We don't have to import things from them. Let's get them to try our foods and support our local farmers. So it's very important that we create clean towns that are friendly to our guests. And so we've been working on that. Renewable energy is something we have to do. You don't want to be a green country or a blue country and still be relying on diesel. That is not going to work. People are a lot more aware than they are a while ago. As far as another pillar would be recycling and integrated waste management plans. We cannot be dumping effluent, rich water into our seas, overusing fertilizers. We've got to start recycling honestly. And even though some people may say we lack the economy of scale to recycle, people will come and help, and they will subsidize our communities because we are going to take this step. We want to do a holistic thing. And then another major part of the way we're going to develop Savu-Savu is marine conservation and integrated coastal management plans that go from your reef to your ridge, because whatever happens on land ends up in the sea. We want to do organic farming. We want to decrease the whatever washes into the creek and may damage reefs. We want to have marine parks where there is a user pay, like any park overseas, a national park. If you've got a dive park, have a ticket fee. Create an incentive for our communities to work within these MPAs. You know, it's not just jobs, but you know, if you go to a national park overseas, there's usually an entry fee. And people and the consumers and the divers will pay these things because they know that they are endorsing or investing in preservation and marine conservation. Sustainable livelihoods, again, we're talking about agriculture done properly. We're talking about aquaculture, which I'm a big fan of. I could go on and on about that, but I won't. And then you've got tourism. Tourism is probably going to be the main pillar of this, and that's where we're going to generate the income. And it's because of what is called the ethical consumer, called the conscientious consumer. Right now, and because I'm from luxury, I'm quite well adapted to seeing how do, you know, everybody's trying to figure out how do we get these young people that are quite affluent, but they aren't following the traditional, aren't going to the traditional Hawaiis, they aren't going to Bali's, they don't like shopping centers. How can we attract them? Well, we can attract them through engaging them. They want to experience culture, they want to be part of communities, and they want to feel like when they spend money in a country like this, that they are actually supporting sustainable initiatives in conservation. I mean, that is part of it. I mean, because Fiji is a hub, we're always going to have, you know, the high turnover things. But for Savu-Savu, we see ecotourism as very important, because the visitor, and I always say, the person who buys a Fiji pearl should not feel like they're just buying a beautiful pearl or coming to Fiji or Savu-Savu. They should feel like they're investing in the health of our oceans and the long-term health of our planet. And that is the way we're going to have to market ourselves in our little bit of the world to be different from everywhere else. We cannot replicate, we cannot do the same as everywhere else. And the last pillar that we would develop in Savu-Savu, of course, is education. I think quite often our people need to understand a lot of these things, the roles they play, the very important roles they play, and why our environment and our marine environment can provide them opportunities and their kids opportunities, and this is how we can be so much more resilient to COVID issues, to any kind of interruptions in the tourism market, eh? So I guess that's what I've got to say. I kind of dream a little bit and think big.
That was awesome. Justin, I think it's showing the different parts of the tourism industry, the different ideas, the innovations that need to come in now. And I think it's probably a good time to relook at some of this. I mean, without a clean, pristine environment and ocean, it will be very hard to sustain our tourism industry. And again, talking about all the different adjustments we are going to have to make post-COVID-19. both for the tourism industry and also for food security, because we're seeing now part of being resilient and the talks that James and Fantasha are having with their members and their workers about how they have to adjust with the situation that's coming to them. And also the point of the ethical consumer, tying in with Fantasha's young, digitally connected traveler. That will probably be one of our main targets, so to speak, to come. We will leave it at that and move on to Danny Jason, a former rival and competitor of mine at high school. He's the owner and operator of Namosi Eco Retreat. He's born in Suva and educated at Maris Brothers High School. He's of mixed parentage, Namosi and Totoya in the Lau group. Danny started with the tourism industry in Nandi to the Coral Coast, then went back to his village to start and create the Namosi Eco Retreat. He is also part of the Nduovata Sustainable Tourism Collective. Danny, you have the floor.
Pinaga Sten. Yeah. For me, tourism started off in Nandi, a waiter, and then I worked myself down to the coast, doing paddleboarding down there. And then while I was doing paddleboarding, I started to save up some money to invest back in my village and take back home all that information and all that experiences that I had there. So going back to the village was a major thing for me. And so going back, sitting with the family in the village, getting them together and talk about this idea of building something from scratch. So I had a little bit of money saved up that I've offered to the village that build the burris that we have up there. And then the idea is to get guests over to experience the lifestyle of the interior people up there. So basically, when guests come up there, they stay in burris where there's no electricity, no phone connection, and no internet connection. So they are away from everything. That is the main thing about getting people out there. And not only that, for them to come and experience the food, the actual food that we eat up there, the Highlanders. So they come there, they eat bell, row, all this. One of the experience that I get out as well is like getting local people to get involved, to come come and experience a very basic, simple lifestyle. That we go farming, harvest your food, prepare it, catch some eels in the river, catch prawns and everything. Use our natural resources around us to build our buildings, build burris and everything. And then we engage with the community as well and the village to protect and preserve the environment up there and showcase to the whole world the other side of Fiji, that is the interior. The other thing that couple of weeks ago, when COVID was, we closed for 2 months. And so when we started, we opened again, we had the mountain bike race, Eco Challenge that we brought it up there. And just working with local, small business like the Takape cycling. I was so proud to work with him to engage these local communities that we have, to bring up there and show them the beauty of the highlands. That is another part of Fiji that has never been ventured, not many before. So that's another thing that we were trying to promote, the interior of Fiji, all the surroundings, all their meals, their lifestyles. And And another thing that we normally take about is the families that we bring up there. Last 2 weekends ago, we had a massive family that came up there, and I took them on a tour on our farm. And this farm has been planted from the guests 1 year back. So they planted ndalo and cassava and kumala and all these local crops that we can grow in our gardens outside. And they came there, they were so surprised. And then they got on their fingers and feet dirty, harvesting it, pulling it out, and clean it up, prepare it, cook it. And at the same time, eating it as well, And even the parents were saying, our kids, only see food packaged in shops and supermarkets. So this is a different, different way of promoting experiences like this, that family can get away from all that gadgets, electronics, and all that noises, and come and just engage with the community, learn and take back these experiences that are, life skills that we survive on. There's another group that came in last weekend, was the boys, teenage group, before school this week. Their parents were like, yeah, take these boys up and get them, engaged in some farming and stuff like that. So this is the kind of things that we are like promoting up there. And of course, the Duovata Collective as well is to promote this kind of tourism in Fiji. To be honest, the question is why aren't people that have worked in tourism come back and take their experience back to their villages, and try and create something, that what I've started. Like the question is, why aren't there more or hundreds more of Namosi Igritis out there? We have the knowledge, we have the skills, we have the land, we have the family that we can bring together and work together to build something like this that is very unique, that is very truly Fijian. And we sell it to the whole world to come to our shores and, and experience it, because this is us. And also, especially our locals. A lot of city kids, and towns and everything are blooming and everything. They forgot about the very basic. So thank God COVID came, that people started going back to their village and started to build, started to do farming again, and that is amazing to see, And one thing that COVID brought as well is when everyone had the curfew and everything, the family was stuck inside their house. They couldn't move. And that is what I've been promoting since 4 years ago when we started, is when the families come there, they got no phones, internet, and everything to, to be away from. So they are themselves there. There's one good example is like, there's a phone company that came up there. And they spent 2 nights there, all the activities, a bit of hiking. They learned how to build a bilibili. These are real Fijian people that have never built a bilibili before. So, and they're like so exciting and everything to learn all this. In the river, natural waters, eating very natural food. And, it's just simple as that. And in the evening, we were sitting around on a basin of grog, and then the CEO said to me, Danny, you know what? This is the first time I ever seen all my workers actually talking to each other by face to face. Before they always talk to each other by phones. So these are kind of like, experiences that people can take back and not take for granted when they go back home. I'm very excited to be here, I'm very excited to be here and to be engaged in this conversation and resetting tourism. So would like, and I would hope that, another thing that I want to touch from is small business and the struggles, how to open up a business in Fiji. Because it took me 2 years to run around for all these approvals, and I know why, that other hoteliers that have left their job and, gone back, the struggle and, how hard it is to open a business, a small business, and I hope in the future that, it can be made easier for startups and Fijians to start their own businesses and have as many more retreats, to showcase the lifestyle in their own village. Yeah, working together as a community, preserving and protecting the land and the trees and everything like that, and the environment, and also waste management, to work together as a community and everything, and we can build something like that. So the last thing I want to touch on is I hope that there will be more people will be, trying to start up their own retreat like mine, and also as the others in the collective Duavata club. And small business can be made easier for startups, and also so for we to value this small business like we value investors.
Vinaka, Danny, that was great.
Thank you
really
very
great
much.
to hear. And an interesting perspective. Another part of the tourism industry. I think we're going to have a great discussion after this. And I'll ask you to talk more about the Nduavata Sustainable Tourism Collective. I know you had plenty thoughts of your own to put in, but we'll get to talk about that so you can explain how that can assist towards the resetting of the tourism industry in the country. Professor Stephen Pratt, he's head of School of Tourism and Hospitality Management at the USP, bachelor and master degrees in economics at the University of Sydney, PhD from the University of Nottingham in the UK. He brings to this panel discussions around closer integrations between the university, between schools and the industry, how the industry and government can use this time to explore better, more sustainable solutions for tourism. Professor Pratt.
Thank Buller, and thank you, Stanley. And thanks to the panelists already. A very hard acts to follow. So the outbreak of COVID, of course, that impacts tourism education and, of course, the future workforce that Fantasia and James, and entrepreneurship that Justin and Danny talked about as well. So I want to touch on three areas where tourism education and the curriculum really needs to change. So we've already touched a little bit on what sort of perceptions are tourists going to have. What are the future markets that are going to come in? So are tourists, if we talk about Australia and New Zealand, what sort of protocols are they wanting? What's going to be acceptable? Are they going to be too rigid or too relaxed? To some extent, of course, it will depend on different markets. Different people have different risk perceptions. Some people might be the millennials will be happy to go and have a more person-to-person contact. Maybe the elderly will be less likely. They'll be more reassured, let's say, if there is more of these cleaning and sanitation. So will they travel internationally as much? And we've seen the government with Tourism Fiji tried to boost tourism, at least domestic tourism, with Love Your Local campaign. I wonder if it means they weren't loving us before, but anyway, there is some very good deals. So including Namosi Eco Resort. So will they travel and will they obey them? So consumer behaviour and tourist behaviour is extremely important going forward. The other issue, I think, is COVID has really accelerated or sped up some of these trends. So the idea of technical innovations. James touched on digital forms, and Fantasia talked about the use of doing things on your mobile phone, and for businesses as well as tourists. And I noted previously in the paper yesterday or the day before the initiative for the online training in digital awareness or digital business for 1,500 workers with APTC. And that's certainly an area that is going to be, to be looked at, especially for some of, initially probably from the larger hotels, the internationally branded hotels that can transfer some of these technologies across their properties. To do some of these things, routine jobs that can be automated, while still recognizing that we need to have the face-to-face contact. That tourism is a people business, and especially in Fiji, that tourism and the people is one of the number one mentioned attributes. So technical innovations, consumer behavior, and crisis management. So industry as well as academia have noted in the tourism industry that we've been affected by these external shocks in the past. If we think about September 11 or SARS or more closer to home, tropical cyclones, particularly Winston, and political upheaval in the past as well. How do we manage when there's a crisis? We can have the best property in the world, we can have the friendliest people, the greatest service, top food, but if there's external factors that are impacting tourists coming to our destination and handling tourists when they're in Fiji to be safe, how are we going to do that? So I think crisis management in terms of the curriculum and in terms of training up through can be universities, vocational institutions as well. How do we educate them or to look after the crisis management thing? So what I'd like to see in the future, you touched on this closer integration and stakeholder. I think James mentioned the word stakeholder engagement. I think that's particularly important. I remember a few years ago there was the Tourism Forum, which tended to be a big, relatively big event that tended to be a lobby event for the tourism industry to get the governments here. Maybe that's not that's a good idea, but maybe something more frequent and maybe more widespread. I mean, James talked about the tourism. Of course, we think of hotels and airlines, but it's not. It's more than that. Of course, it affects the whole economy and so many more sectors involved in providing tourism services and products. So I think that's particularly important to have maybe more things like town hall type style meetings that don't have to be fancy or cost a lot to host, but can give many different sectors of the economy a voice and bring everybody to the table. So I think that's quite important. I'd like to see maybe more resources put into a policy. So traditionally, or the history of Fiji's tourism industry in the 70s and 80s was entrepreneurs, predominantly from Australia, New Zealand, setting up properties and tourist accommodation for people to come and so it was fairly, the government was fairly hands-off in that respect, at least in terms of creating and setting policies and strategic plans. I would like to see maybe a chance for government to take the initiative and for places that we've seen else in the Pacific, Vanuatu, Cook Islands, for governments to look into that and take the initiative. I think that's about all it. I just want to say there's no magic wand. We shouldn't be waiting. We've sort of waited enough, and so we can use universities, industries, and government can use this time now to better explore these opportunities and sustainable solutions.
Professor Stephen Pratt, thank you very much for that. I think we've had a really wide-ranging perspective, wide lens look at the tourism industry. And before I take questions from the floor, please put your hands up if you have a question to give to the panelists, and I'll take the first question.
Thank you very much, Stanley, and thanks to all the panelists for a really interesting discussion. So my name's Marita Manley. I'm from the Duavata Sustainable Tourism Collective, and we run Talanoa Treks. And what I'd like to reflect on is that we started Talanoa Treks about 6 years ago. And until that point, I probably personally hadn't reflected enough about the contribution of the tourism sector to broader development goals, and many of you have talked about some of this already. And unfortunately, I think it's taken a crisis like this for us to really reflect on the way that the tourism industry affects many parts of the economy, and not just as a tax base, which is obviously very important, but in many other areas. Fantasha referred to, our agriculture sector and agricultural value chains, but many other areas of the economy are also heavily impacted. And I'd like to ask what opportunities the panelists see for a much closer collaboration between the tourism sector as a whole and the public sector and CSOs when we're talking about issues like climate change goals or cultural and heritage protection, about planting 30 million trees. Why are we not doing this together as stakeholders? Why are there not more opportunities for us to talk about partnership approaches that can use the energy and the drive of the private sector and combine it with, the strategy and the policy goals of the public sector. So, yeah.
Thank you. Natasha, if you can, Fantasha, sorry. If you can, I can talk to that. And I think I was just thinking as Marita was making that point, that too often we say that Fiji relies on the tourism industry. And perhaps the reset now is how can Fiji build on the tourism industry in terms of the other diversification that needs to take place?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. There are certainly lots and lots of opportunities out there for us to work together in terms of public and private partnerships. And one very key one that would make sure that we're looking at it as a whole, for the whole of Fiji's benefit, and it's also an opportunity, is looking at the environment. Currently, tourism is the only industry paying ECAL, the Environmental Climate Adaptation Levy, and it's 10%. If you're going to charge the 10%, for instance, and you want to at the same time implement behavioral changes across the country for everyone to take an interest in the environment, protecting it, looking after it, and looking out for a long-term benefit for the whole country and future generations, then to push that behavioral change, why don't we work towards looking for incentives, more incentives to make these behavioral changes come about faster? So if you're going to charge 10%, for instance, and the business, whatever business it is, because many of the tourism businesses already do this, they apply their own waste recycling programs. Our friend from Savo has just mentioned that it's a key area of interest for them. Whether it's recycling any sort of energy or looking at cleaner energy programs, allow the same businesses to claim some sort of carbon credit back. Now, yes, it means the public sector has to realign itself to how it's going to count what these credits look like, but that is a way for you to really push some good behavioral changes from the general public, from the business community, and not just private sector. Public sector will follow suit as well, right up to how you purchase a water tank to, Suva. I don't see enough water tanks here. We only seem to see it in the western side. But we've got water coming out of our ears here in Suva, but no one is incentivized to collect the water, yet we're the first ones to complain when the water is shut off by the water authority, but we're not doing anything about changing this behavior. So we need to work together to change behavior. That's for the environment. For agriculture, for fisheries, FHTA has reached out to all the ministries involved to say, what can we do together? Tourism is based in the most isolated places in the 333 islands around Fiji. We can reach out and tell you what's going on because there's a business, whether it's a hotel, a resort, a dive property, some sort of activity is happening somewhere around Fiji that keeps an eye on what's going on. If somebody is building irresponsibly, damaging coral, damaging land, simply cutting down mangroves or forests that they shouldn't be. It's the tourism operator who will bring it to the environmental people's attention. If there's mining or gravel extraction going on, these are the people that will tell you these things. So yes, we can work very closely with public sector to be your eyes and ears, to help you understand how it works, and to get it out there a lot faster, as Marita is saying.
James, your reflections on the question?
Thank you. From the transport sector, I can assure you that we're doing all we can in terms of for us as a ground transportation. We have the past years invested in hybrid vehicles, not the second-hand ones, but the brand new hybrid that is provided by Esco Motors, the RAV4 hybrid. Although it poses some challenges in terms of space for our purpose, but I think for our purpose we compelled to be investing in Euro 5 standard vehicles, which is now the norm for vehicle imports. But yeah, so I agree with Fantasha back on the ECAL. I think as far as reset, and I'm sure government is working through this, and we'll be hearing it in the budget announcement, the distribution of, the levy in terms of ECAL, because we all, as a tourism industry, we seem to feel that we are pointed as the bad boys or the bad girls, being the cause of the destruction in the environment for some reason. Yet we see haulage trucks and factories and all the remnants of their production. They're not paying ECAL. Why aren't they? So maybe the question needs to be posed at a different forum. I think we're doing our part, and I think it needs to be, the love needs to be spread out so that everyone, because not only for revenue generation, but for appreciation for and being accountable for your action. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I get Justin and the others to maybe comment on that, I'll take a question from the forum.
Thank you. My name is Donna Herder, and I'm with Internews. The panelists spoke very well, and all of your comments, all of your presentations were very interesting. My question is, mentioned some of the things that government can consider so businesses, especially in this time, can take off. And one of it was doing away with a lot of the bureaucratic procedures so that businesses and startups can start soon enough, especially locally owned businesses. I want to hear what the panelists would recommend to government at this time, because I noticed that there are no one from government. So I want to hear some of the recommendations you want to put forward to government now. And for instance, do you think that government should take away the HTT tax? Or do you think that the government should look at opening borders to the region? Should we look at the region for regional tourism instead of our major tourism markets like Australia, New Zealand, and the US?
Okay, everybody's on the spot. What do you want to see bureaucratic change would you like to see to make business more easy?
I think the first thing we got to do is realize that we get a lot of donor funding that doesn't do much for our country and our people. And I think one of the first things we got to do is work with government, and the whole purpose of the Blue Town is taking the initiative and getting the funding and putting it where we know we need it. We get probably some of the highest per capita donor funds for fisheries, agriculture, forestries, huge amounts of money. But we're getting Band-Aid solutions because we're letting researchers and people who are going after that grants to pay themselves pick what they're doing. We've got to start taking ownership of that, investing in sewage plants, rubbish dumps that work, because everybody wants to show the coral planting because it looks good, but nobody wants to really fix the underlying issues of why that coral's dying. And I think from my perspective, that's the whole purpose of the Blue Town, is to create a model where we can go after donor funding because we know where it should go. We shouldn't leave it in the hands of other people. we've got to take ownership and do some of that stuff. Sorry if I didn't answer some of that, but
Yeah. So you're
that's one of
responding
my
to Marita
purposes.
Manley's question. Danny, some of the bureaucratic changes you'd like to see? You spoke about
Yes,
the 2
that
years.
was a really good point. I would like more, to be made easier for local people trying to start their own businesses and stuff, and and made it easier for them rather than running around and sending them run the block for 2 years trying to get all these paperwork done and all these requirements that are to start up a business. So I would like a lot of engagement and for people to really listen to the people down there and their concerns and everything about get things going, starting their own businesses and stuff.
Fantastic.
We've been working with the Ministry of Tourism quite closely on that and providing them a list of what makes it so difficult to do business in Fiji. And to their credit, they have already started work on improving the ease of doing business in Fiji, which is what you're talking about. So trying to get all the processes together and trying to get agencies across the board who all want the same thing but want every single piece of document to be provided a couple of times over. Understanding the number of times you need a licensing, do you need it every 6 months or will a year be sufficient? So that's with the tourist transport people, that's with the MSEF and marine people, that's with the town councillors. It's right across the board with all the agencies. So in answer to your question, they have already started work on that. I can't promise when it's going to be completed, but they are working on it.
James and Professor Pratt, a lot of this, when you talk to business people, a lot of the bureaucratic issues that they raise, a lot of it has to do about standards. The standards that you have to meet, so government cannot just put them away. These are standards of environment, some standards of safety. So how does that?
But Stanley, each of them ask for the same thing. So
the same thing over and over
so
again.
Your OHS, your NFA, your business license, your birth certificate to get a business license, to open a bank account, you need a birth certificate and a business license and something else and a VAT number. So it's asking for the same thing over and over.
Yes.
Whereas if you just provided it once and you've got something that tells you you can go to the next place and get the next part of your business done.
I think everyone can relate to that so well. Yeah.
Thank you, Stan. I just want to respond to that good question. What can be done is the public sector should just realign, we are all realigning our purpose. They are responsible for various sectors, whatever industry. Now is the time. Now is the time for them to sit and reassess what is their function and who are their stakeholders. Are they engaging with their stakeholders? If not, then they have failed. So this is the time to encourage more engagement. Come out into the field. And I'm sorry to say this in public, but we've been requesting meetings with a certain statutory authority that relates directly to our business, with the LTA, since July last year. We've met the minister before they've come back to us. Actually, they haven't even responded to us. So they are making policies in isolation. And now, with the changes that COVID is bringing about, the gap is going to continue to widen if they do not engage. And that's just one example. And I give a more specific example. I go back to licensing. If I'm going to apply for what we call a hire permit, you'll see vehicles in the West with a yellow number plate with the LH. Those are licensed vehicles to carry passengers, up to 8 passengers, 8 seats in the vehicle. And then you'll see vehicles with a white plate that has a B sticker on it. Those are called the omnibus passengers, vehicles that can carry, that are licensed for vehicles with 16 seats more. There's nothing in the Act that covers 9 and 15 seats vehicles, although that's the most in-demand vehicles in our business, like a minivan, for example. Yet over these years, we've gone over and over again and asked, please, it just takes consultation, understanding, and the will to facilitate efficiency. That's basically what we're saying. The other thing is when we go and apply for a permit, we've been doing business for 21 years. The same requirements that we did with our first vehicle, we've had to do with a 50 plus vehicle, the same vehicle, same requirements of paperwork, mountains of paperwork that you bring to the office for the pen pushers to tick the box and circulate and just fulfill that. And there's no urgency because they don't understand our need. As I mentioned, COVID is going to need us to provide more vehicles because of the restricted numbers of vehicles. Will they be able to deliver that? So I think it's a key, it's so easy. It's just a matter of reaching out to your stakeholders, have a town hall session, as you said, and let them process our needs, and so that we have a mutual understanding. Otherwise, we'll have an us and them, and the gap will just continue to get wider and wider.
And that goes to several ministries getting passed on. So an opportunity perhaps to get our process requirements and legislation in line. Professor Pratt, do you have some thoughts on that?
Sorry, I just want to address, you asked the question about Pacific travel. So on the face of it, we would say, okay, Fiji is COVID contained, and other Pacific countries don't have COVID, so it makes sense that we should be having some, relatively free travel, maybe without. If there's no COVID, you could argue that what's the need for the quarantine? I see quarantining a good first step, but at the moment, if you're only staying a short time in, let's say, for Fiji, it's not very attractive to either have to quarantine before and then quarantine in Fiji, or vice versa, and then have to return home and quarantine. It suits for those, I think they refer to the high net worth individuals that are staying for, longer length, quite a long length of stay. That makes sense for them. But for a short holiday, quarantining is a necessary first step, but not so attractive, for your traditional tourists. Okay, so we say, well, what about the Pacific? Yeah, there should be. But we're probably not confident at the moment. I guess governments are not respective governments not so confident, given that COVID is just so contagious, and the outbreaks have happened. So we have these protocols. I mean, even I ask a rhetorical question: why do we COVID contained, but we're still following the protocols? Some people might say, why do we need to? We should be acting like we're pre-COVID, and you'll see some people will fist bump, some people will shake hands. Okay, so we have the protocols to get us used to, or maybe because we 100% don't test. We haven't tested everybody, so let's just be safe. Or do we do it because, okay, we don't know in the future, this is the hackneyed new normal, that we need to do this if we're going to open up eventually. I mean, it's not really a rhetorical question why we're doing these things. We do it because we need to obey the government. But the underlying issue, I guess, is eventually why we need to do it.
Okay, great point. We talked about the ethical consumer, the new tourist, so to speak. And a lot of the things, how can we cater for them more? Because some of the things we may be already doing, maybe we're not telling the story effectively to the tourists that come about how we are investing in our people, how this is going into our community, how we really are making an effort to be environmentally friendly, to meet climate change adaptation standards, so to speak. Justin?
Yeah, I think in this age it's going to be not certification, it's going to be transparency. And that's what people are going to look for. They're not going to be fooled by green or blue washing. And I think it's something that we have to look at I think the best thing we can do is make sure our existing operators that we've all gone through this incredibly difficult time together are there on the other side to work together to get out of it, because nothing brings people together as hardship, and we don't want to see these guys going. And I think we need a unified approach, and we need to do things in a transparent manner, whether that's using social media is not going to let you get away with things now. And we've got to work together. We've got to just find a better way and put our best foot forward always.
That's a real risk, Fantasha, that the people who have gained all this experience, who've worked in the industry, who've invested in vehicles, in land, in training, that they may not be there if this continues. On the other side, if they don't get the right support now.
I totally agree. We need to band together as not only an industry, but as groups that need one another. We also worry greatly about the number of businesses that will come out on the other side, because we don't know how long this will all take. And not everybody is built to be able to take the knocks that are being felt right now. And as James has alluded to, the West is feeling it really, really badly. So there's a huge number of unemployed people. According to the ILO, 118,000 workers are now out of jobs. As James has said, not all of them will be taken back in the short term. And the long term sounds like it's going to be a year or even later. What do we do with our unemployed in the meantime? And there may be opportunities there for Stephen and other institutions like USP to be thinking about how we can re-engage with our unemployed people.
From the tourism industry.
Yeah, from the tourism industry.
Danny, talking about working together, you have the Nduavata Sustainable Tourism Collective. How are you guys working together to try and keep each other going, or to have this mindset of sustainable tourism moving?
Yes, thank you, Stanley. So what we're trying to do with the Nduavata Collective Sustainable is to continue our support and creating more sustainable stuff. Like, for example, this weekend at the Namosi retreat, the Nduavata Collective have come together to with Marangeti Fiji, Nature Fiji, to rethatch the bur in Namosi. So that is something, and we put it out there to the public, and we're fully booked. People want to come and see that, happy. And that is one thing that we're trying to get, get people to come and engage and have that experience, that knowledge, to take back and then inspire the people to go build theirs, and start up their own as well, And the other thing is we're trying to attract the people that will come to our places like, Namosi or Leleovia, or to go walking with the Talano tracks or with the Lawaki beach house, and just people that are in the same sense of protecting the environment and looking after it and educating the locals to, be proud of their own land, and in the same way preserve it and look after it, And those are the two key points that we are working together here. Thank you.
Great. About the hotel industry the tourism industry looking at its prices. That it's too expensive. This has been a comment for a very long time. The prices being charged at the hotels is too high, they're saying, compared to Bali and the others. So can you become more competitive, drop some of your prices, including beer that was mentioned, become more affordable? While we're waiting for that question, what's your view of that? Can we do that?
Yes, I have a few comments to make on that. And one is for people to understand how these pricing comes together. What creates a price within a hotel or a tourism business? So it's the cost of your operations. It's what you're paying your workers. I constantly say, don't compare Fiji with Bali, because people don't know what the staff in Bali are being paid. We pay far higher, And the people at this forum will actually confirm that for you. So we're looking after our staff, and we should pay them well. We train them well. They're very skilled, and they do their job the best in the world, and that's why we have such a large tourism industry. The costs are also made up of what we have to pay for when we bring things in from overseas. Alcohol has a very, very high duty. So if you're landing a bottle of imported vodka, for instance, for around $20 to $30, by the time it hits the barman serving it, that same price for one nip can go to $60 Fijian. Why is that? And that is because it's built in with the freight cost, the cost of the alcohol tax itself.
Or what about the local beer then, for instance?
Well, the local beer, the barman that is serving it to you is probably getting paid $6 to $7 an hour. If he's working on a weekend or a public holiday, he's getting weekend or public holiday rates. The hotel that it's being served at is paying 25% taxes. So it's not just serving you the beer to make a huge profit on it. It has to pay its leases. It has to pay for it to be a beautiful hotel. It has to make sure that all its regulatory compliance requirements are paid for and looked after. It has public liability. It's got insurance. So let's say a hotel is earning 1.25 million and over. It is expected to pay 25% tax, so that's the STT, the VAT, and the ECAL. Together they make 25%. A smaller business right next door is not earning 1.25 million. Let's say it's earning under 1 million. Is only going to pay the VAT. Now, if both properties are selling you a curry, or a beer for that matter, the price has gone up by 16% to the property that has to pay both the STT and ECAL.
So you're not overcharging?
I don't believe we're overcharging. If they're going to bring their prices down like they are for the local Love Your Locals program, for instance, there's no one making a profit on that. There's barely people breaking even on the business. But they're doing it because they're bringing staff back, giving them employment, they're testing their new processes, and they're not opening, if it's a 200-room hotel, it's not opening 200 rooms, it's simply opening 20 rooms or a block so that you can just switch on the power for that block. And local tourism is only using the property for weekends most of the time. So it's a testing process, because when and if the borders open, you're going to have to be ready. The other thing that having 25% taxes on the tourism industry does is, if you're an entrepreneur like Dan is, and you're wanting to start up a business, are you going to be thinking that you're going to be a business that's going to make 1.25 million and over? Because the minute you go over, you're paying 25%. If you stay under, then you're not going to pay that. So is that an incentive for growth if you're a business? And if we're trying to create more entrepreneurship in Fiji, is that going to really be the case for young entrepreneurs to say, well, I'll start a business, but I'll hope not to make more than 1.25 million. The idea is not to take away the taxes. We know taxes are needed. It's needed for all our social services. The government needs this to make Fiji tick. The idea is to provide a tax regime that is more equitable, that is spread out across the board, so that the more you make, obviously the more you should be paying in taxes. But if you're a small business and you have a small bar, let's say you have 5 rooms and you have a bar, you're paying a $3,000 alcohol license, a liquor license, that the Sheraton next door, who's a much bigger property than you, is paying exactly the same. Why are the two of you being treated like the exact same businesses? You're not.
It's I think, creating greater understanding of
Don't
the
get me
situation. The understanding, and I know you probably really want to say more about that. Is the question ready? Yes? Can I have your question?
Hello, thank you very much, panelists, for your wonderful speeches. And I'm Leona, I'm from the deaf community. Just a question concerning the United Nations Convention of Rights of People with Disability, which is being rectified already in Fiji. I'm just wondering if if you have person with disability being employed in your area, or you have made an effort that person with disability is working in your area.
How is the industry addressing that? Obviously, you make accommodations in your vehicles for this. James, would you like to talk about that?
From our perspective, from our business, it is, to be honest, it is a very mobile business where it involves moving parts, moving machinery, moving people all over the country, and there are certain requirements that's, physical requirements that's needed. However, I don't know how you define disability. We do have within our team people who have certain disabilities that we have managed. And these are in the form of medical conditions which limits the ability to perform certain tasks. So, we certainly, as a company, we do have that in our company, and we just manage that with respect. And the one thing that I've learned in managing this issue in our company is when you make them, again, it comes back to this consultation. When you talk about it and when you tell them it is okay to have that limitation, they flourish because everyone is understanding. If I were to be approached for, the thing is we just haven't had any, in our experience, any application of anyone from the community. So if there's a way, pre-COVID, if there was a way we could facilitate, we would. But right now, I think moving forward, everyone is streamlining and very focused in terms of their hiring.
Thank you, James. I think time has caught up with us, and I won't be able to take any more questions. I think there's plenty more to discuss. But in terms of going forward, I'd like to give the panelists to give their concluding remarks, 2 minutes each, and then we'll close the panel. We can start from you, Professor Pratt.
Yeah, thank you. Some great discussions here, and I'd like to see, the stimulus from this forum, the Resetting Fiji, to be a stimulus to encourage the public-private partnership and bring everybody to the table. So it'll be great. Where do we want to end up? What does Fiji tourism look like, or Fiji and Fiji tourism look like? When things, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but when things, when the borders open and we can welcome tourists back. I think that strategy and goal setting, I think, is an important first step. So.
Thank you. Danny?
I think the main thing now is just to work together with every stakeholders and government and everything like that. And I think that's the only way forward with us. And just, take it easy and just go with the flow, and I'll see what happens.
Justin, what's the next step to realize the blue economy and all the things that you've discussed that needs to happen?
You don't waste a crisis. There's going to be opportunity that comes out of this, and I mean, this is hard to say because a lot of people are in not a very good place right now. I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we do not come out of this the same as we went into it, and we get better, we get stronger, and we get smarter, and we build a new version of what we want to be. We don't want to be the Balis, we don't want to be any place else, we want to be Fiji, eh? And we want to provide the maximum benefits to our people, to our country and communities, as a tourism industry should. And again, it's hard to see past this, but I also think our climate is going to help us, and the fact that we've got a low population density and maybe being a place where people can come to escape COVID. COVID's not going to go away anytime soon unless there's a vaccine. And I think it'll follow a trajectory somewhat like the flu, which thrives in colder climates. And so maybe we'll be able to fill up the off seasons, with people trying to get away from these things. There's a lot to learn, but we've got to keep our head up, and look for the opportunities that are going to come, because there's going to be a lot, and we have to be ready to take advantage and move forward as a country and together. And I hope this brings a lot of us together.
Thank you. James?
Naka, Stanley. Just my final comments. I just want to urge people to stay informed and appreciate the information that you have and how everyone can play a part in containing COVID within our country as we continue to rebuild our beautiful country as an ideal destination for tourists. Everyone has a part to play. Secondly, we need to keep this type of forum going. We need a lot more talanoa at all levels that I've mentioned before. That has to keep going. We have good time now to talanoa, a lot of time to reflect. The third point is everyone is suffering, and I think there's no time to go and bury your head in the sand and feel sorry for yourself. This is the time, and I say this to my team as recent as last week when we came together again. This is the time that everyone creates their legacy. As a company, as individuals, as organizations, are you going to adapt and be resilient, or are you going to just simply give up and moan? So I think that's the takeaway that I'd like to just leave. Let's come together. Once we understand everyone, we can bind together and be more resilient. We will get through this. The final point is people need to be aware, as far as our industry is concerned, we are currently missing our peak earning months. Our season starts around June or late May, right through to October, with a bit of break in November, and then the Christmas season picks up again, and then there's a lull from January through to April. So we have accepted it as a business that we are losing out on these peak months that we would have been flourishing as an industry and maintaining employment. But we move past that. How can we prepare for the next one? One more thing in being informed and being aware. In a few months, we are entering into our seasonal, in our weather months again of October, November. So we have another added challenge of tropical cyclones and weather challenges. So there will never be an end to challenges, but we will have to just remain resilient at all levels, in our level.
Naka.
James ended with what I was going to start off with. I think there are two key areas that tourism will come through on to help Fiji get out of this. One is resilience. It's an industry that has always been resilient. And looking to your people and looking after them is absolutely the right thing to do, because they will need all the support that they can get right now. And the other one is that the environment will be the area for Fiji to focus on, because that's what's going to get us through everything. If we're to have an industry that lasts for the next 50 and 100 years, then we must take care of the environment so that it takes care of us. And within that are huge opportunities, whether you're looking at agriculture, whether you're looking at a new business, there are huge opportunities. The thing is to ask the questions, to do the talanoa, to reach out and ask the questions of the right people, and they will give you those answers. In something that Dan just said when he was talking about helping communities do the thatching, there in itself is an opportunity that most people don't even know about. They've cut down almost all the huge plantations that provides the thatching for our bures, as he will tell you. And Namosi has one of the few large plantations of these trees left. They take 20 years for you to be able to use thatching, for it to become an adult tree and you use the thatching. So in everything that we do in Fiji, instead of sitting back and moaning, we can look for opportunities. And the opportunities are there in the environment. We just have to reach out.
Thank you. Maintaining hope and continue to take action. Thank you, Fantasha, James, Justin, Danny, Stephen, for joining me on this panel on Reset Fiji. It's been a wonderful discussion. We welcome your feedbacks, your comments that you're on the Reset Fiji page and to this discussion. And we hope you'll join us again for the next Reset Fiji panel next week. From here in Laucala, good night.